Tom, Chi, and Julia are the change we want to see. They are transforming their world. Let's give them another hand. Today, we have the unique opportunity to listen to a conversation with leaders in the movement who are designing, funding, leading, and advocating for charter schools that demonstrate the possibilities. Esteemed education journalist John Merrow volunteered to moderate the conversation, and he will need to tap his more than 3 decades of experience to manage these dynamic charter school leaders. John's Learning Matters documentaries and his PBS NewsHour Merrow report frequently remind the public that quality charter schools must be a part of the solution to eliminate the persistent achievement gap. Thank you, John, for joining us and moderating this important conversation. Big John. Big John. Hey.
Every morning in your mind, you can see him arrive. He's still 6'6" and weighing 245, kind of broad at the shoulder.
Nina Rees is the new President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Alliance for Public Charter Schools. Nina comes to the Alliance with more than 20 years of experience in education, which has taken her to the White House, to the Department of Education, and beyond. As the first Assistant Deputy Superintendent for Innovation and Improvement at the U.S. Department of Education, she oversaw the administration of 28 grant programs and was responsible for spearheading initiatives aimed at innovation in education, including innovative school choice, charter schools, alternative routes to teacher certification, and school leadership. The Alliance Board is confident that Nina is the leader the Alliance needs now. Her commitment to innovation, autonomy, accountability, parental choice, and growth with quality is respected throughout the movement, and we are excited to have her join us. Also joining us on the stage this morning is Howard Fuller, the founder and director of the Institute for the Transformation of Learning at Marquette University. Howard served as superintendent of the Milwaukee Public Schools and leads the board of the Black Alliance for Educational Options, better known as BAO. He is a former chair of the National Alliance Board and a 2007 Hall of Fame inductee. At the 2012 New Schools Summit, my boss, Ted Mitchell, introduced Howard as the conscience of the movement.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up.
I am very pleased to welcome Don Shalvey to today's keynote panel. Don is currently the Deputy Director of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's U.S. Programs Education Initiative. He founded and led Aspire Public Schools and was a leader in the passage of the 1998 California Charter Schools Act, which lifted the cap on the number of charter schools in the state. Don is often called the godfather of the charter management organizations. Our look at the next 20 years of public education would not be complete without our final panelist, John Danner. John is the CEO and co-founder of Rocket Ship Education. Rocket Ship schools combine traditional classroom instruction with a personalized blended learning model that is closing the achievement gap. John has often been labeled the movement's futurist. Okay, Big John, let's get the conversation started.
Thank you very much, Deborah. I may never live down that song, but someone in my office did that. This is a great group, and we're going to talk about the next 20 years, but I want to start by asking particularly Howard and Don to look back, what have we done well over the last 20 years? What's gone right with charter schools?
Howard, you want to go?
There you go.
So, as the founder of California's first charter school, I can tell you it was a Wild West show in those days. We were making the rules up. So we kind of got that right. Let's make the rules up. I'll tell you the couple of things I think we have done and done well. One is we have brought an entirely new group of professionals to the profession of teaching and leading. Would never have seen the amount of energy coming into this profession without the charter school movement. I would certainly say that.
It's the challenge of entrepreneurship?
It's the challenge of entrepreneurship. It's the challenge of making a vision a reality. It's every one of us who's ever taught in a classroom, always dreamed if I could do my own school. Well, lots of folks got the chance to do their own school 20 years ago, and more of that is encouraging. So I would say that's the big thing. Let Howard take it from there.
What else has gone well?
I would say two things. First of all, I think that we put to rest the lie that poor kids and kids from so-called dysfunctional families cannot learn. And so even though we still got all of these haters out there, who continue to make that case, the reality is that the charter movement has very clearly said that all of our kids can learn. And like Mortimer Adler said, there really are no unteachable kids. What there are adults who have never figured out how to reach them. And so I think that our movement has said that. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you all, thanks to all of my tweeters out there, and I hope you all will follow me. I'm supposed to say that, so unashamedly, I'm asking you to follow me on Twitter. At Howard L. Fuller. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so now...
I had to get that commercial in.
That's okay.
All right. The second thing, though, that I think that we've done well, and it's to tag on to what Don said. The charter movement is a weird collection of people in the sense that you got some people who hate vouchers, some people who support vouchers, some people who hate nonprofits, some people who are for nonprofits, some people who think that we shouldn't have accountability, some people who do. So what the beauty of the movement has been, at least for the time being, we've been able to bring all of these people into the same room and be committed to our kids.
Now let's talk about what has not gone well, and you got all four of you coming in. Let's start with special needs kids, with special education. A report came out yesterday from the GAO indicating that in traditional public schools, 11.2% of the kids special category special needs, but in charters across the country, it's only 8.2%. Now, there were some exceptions. Minnesota is one of the exceptions, where the charter schools here, in fact, have the same number, or even more, than traditional schools. But across the country, that's not an accident. Why is it happening, and what can be done about it?
I'll take that. So a couple of thoughts. First and foremost, when you look at a lot of the charter schools in the field, they actually serve a fair number of special needs students, but they do a better job of mainstreaming them, so the label is not attached to them as they move through the charter system. The other piece of it, which is a reality actually with all of the funding that follows students to charter schools, is that they actually don't get their fair share of funding when it comes to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So those
Which means what?
They're getting about 20% less.
So therefore, they discourage those kids?
Well, to the extent it's happening, as a movement, we oppose those activities, and we feel very strongly in activities that bring together different charter schools and create shared service type models to make sure that charter schools have the resources that they need to attack the problem.
But it is a problem.
In certain places, we have heard that it's a problem, but it's not, in my opinion, a systemic problem.
I mean, I would just add, John, the idea that there is a set number of special ed children in the world is just a crazy, crazy idea. What Nina alluded to, the fact that you as a school can get to a child before they fall significantly behind and help them and intervene is the right way to do special education. A lot of us do response to intervention and get that right, and so fewer kids fall through the cracks all the way until the point they get an IEP. I think that should be positive.
I mean, there's no question. I've been a reporter for a long time that schools create special needs kids.
Right.
No question. But the numbers don't lie. I mean, if you get 11.2% special needs kids, 8.2% in charters. So what?
Yeah. So I can't speak for all charter schools, only for Rocketship. If you look at the number of students that come to us that are kind of right on the edge, that we then spend daily 2 hours a day with, tutoring and working with them individually, and they never get to the point that they need an IEP, how do we count that? That's not in the statistics.
John, Howard,
Yeah.
you want to?
So, John, I think what I would say is it's a small problem. There are schools that clearly don't feel capable of serving students with special needs, and they may inadvertently try to avoid that. But I would also tell you on the other side of this, we at the foundation are doing an RFP process with 8 cities across the country. And the charters and the district leaders in all 8 of those cities propose special ed support. They want to solve this.
But along the lines that Nina suggested, where there's a collaboration?
Well, there's a collaboration, and quite frankly, most public schools are having a tough time figuring this out.
Right.
And the need to have more and more talented educators in special ed is absolutely critical. So this is not like charters are turning their back on it. It's not like they're avoiding it. They want to get better at this in the same way they've learned to serve kids better and better over 20 years.
I've been filming in New Orleans since Katrina and actually screening some of that documentary this afternoon, but it's very clear we saw cases where parents would be counseled out. You know, you're welcome here, but they can do a much better job down there, that sort of thing. And there is no coordination of services. I mean, okay, what else has gone wrong in the last 20 years? I mean, let me suggest, I hear Ernie Duncan saying, I support quality charter schools. Now, nobody says I'm going to go buy a quality Cadillac. So why apparently do we have so many low quality charter schools that the Secretary of Education and others have to differentiate between quality and other? Is it too easy to get a charter?
Well, let me start with the first question you asked, what has gone wrong? So before you point me to something that's gone wrong, let me tell you my own wrong before we get to yours. It's not so much something that's gone wrong, but something I'm very concerned about. I'm gonna keep talking about it as long as people invite me to speak anywhere. We got to have more high-performing schools and networks of high-performing schools led by people of color. Those people of color also have to have access to the level of resources that other people have. And there are high-performing schools out there right now that you never even hear about. They get no play, man, because they got no social capital to get that kind of play. If we don't deal with that in this movement is going to fail. And I've said it, and I know people, don't like me to say it. I'm saying it again. It's a very important thing for us to confront. Now, on the low quality thing, the reality of it is, I'll just speak for myself. I know 20 years ago, and Ted and Joe and all these people can talk about it. I think the job of starting a great school is excruciatingly difficult. The only thing that's more difficult is sustaining one. And I think what has happened is that we came into the movement with this notion that we could do it better, but not necessarily understanding how difficult it was going to be to do it better. And many people are trying to do it better with fewer resources. The other thing that happened, obviously, is that the good part of having people come in from the outside and bringing new energy and all of that is having new people come in, bringing new energy. The bad part is you have new people come in who don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And as a result, create terrible schools. And we as a movement have to stand up and very clearly say, we're going to fight to make sure that every kid is in a quality school. Now the issue, and we'll talk about it later, is what is it that really defines what constitutes a quality school?
Let's come back to that, yeah, because I want to hear what others would say.
John?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I would point to is that I think there's an obligation within the movement to self-police. So a good example of this is in New Orleans. They received an I3 grant to begin to level up the quality of the overall charters by closing ones that were not meeting the standard and reopening them as high-performing charters. So when we received 8 charters in New Orleans last year, it was specifically to replace low-performing charters. So I think there's an obligation within the movement to self-police, but it does depend on authorizers knowing where those lines are and having kind of the political courage to say, okay, we made some mistakes on some of the ones we approved and we need to replace them with higher performing.
New Orleans has closed 7 charter schools. Is that a good number?
Probably not enough yet.
Probably not enough.
Probably not.
Yeah. Are we not tough enough? Is that really the question? Nina?
Can I just
Sure.
ask the question a little differently? So when you look at the research,
No.
I can, but I don't. But I'm sitting next to you. How about you guys? Can you?
when you look at the research on charter schools, one of the things you notice very quickly is that the schools that seem to be doing particularly well are the ones that are in the inner city settings. And that's, in my opinion, where the urgency is greatest and where we need to really focus our attention to making sure we're scaling those programs and being more effective. In the suburbs, the story is a little bit different, but it could also be that the families in those suburbs are selecting a school of choice for reasons other than academics. I'm not making an excuse for that, but the research so far seems to point to the fact that the urgency and the fact that a lot of inner city charter schools are knocking it out of the ballpark and doing an extremely good job of closing the achievement gap. So we need to take the lessons of those schools and try to really make the next 20 years about scaling those schools, finding the model programs and finding ways to scale not just effective charter schools, but the conditions under which effective programs can succeed and newcomers can come in with the confidence and the funding that they need to do an effective job.
Yeah, John, so where did I think we got it wrong? First of all, I think we carved out this space more in terms of competition and this notion that all of us in the beginning were going to compete and beat the traditional public school system. As a result of that, we carved out a space that's looked at as far more battleground than common ground. And that has really kept, I think, superintendents who can see the value of charters in their systems from doing the kinds of things to actually spread the practices and spread the cultures. Because what we see now, I mean, I'm telling you, the whole blended learning piece that John is leading, this country's blended learning revolution is happening within charters first and foremost. And if districts don't get that right, and if we don't pave a way to say there's more common ground than there is battleground over the next 20 years, we'll be missing an important step in this.
It's interesting because the notion of charter schools initially was born here in this state in 1988 at Tosca. I happened to be there, and there are a bunch of people in this room now who were there. The idea was that every school district would start a charter school, and it would be a little lab, and you could incubate ideas. That has never happened because it became them versus us. Yeah. Is there a way to, in the next 20 years, to get past them versus us?
Well, I don't know that I buy what you just said, man, because I don't think the notion was every district was supposed to have a charter school. I thought the notion was freedom in exchange for accountability. And that the deal was that we were going to be given freedom to create some different environments for kids. And the trade-off was we were willing to be held accountable.
But the thought was that school districts would say, yes, you've got the freedom, we're going to watch you, and if it works, we'll copy it. But
yeah, I agree with you. But what I'm saying is, I don't think people started out, when I got in it, which was in 1991, 92, I was a superintendent. My whole thing was not to create some charter schools inside the district as much as it was to create the freedom to get outside of the district, because anybody with any sense know you want to get outside of the district.
Right.
So, I mean, I mean, I have to say that, and maybe people disagree. I'm not saying, and Don, I can talk, I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about partnerships and stuff with districts, but if we're going to be reform-minded, the last thing a reform superintendent should want to do is to bring independent charters back into the district. What you really should be trying to do is to create within your district those schools that would have some of the same freedoms as charters.
That's the idea, John.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a slight pivot from Howard on this. And just to start with, I'm Doo-Wop Don on Twitter, so if you want to follow me too, I had to get that in. Old rock and roll disc jockey, former superintendent. Here's my hope, John. There are 55 million kids in this country, 2.1 million in charters, 1.5 million in homeschools. It's small, it's significant, but if we don't find a way for these high-performing charter schools to impact the lives of those kids in traditional public schools, we're missing the boat about opportunity for every youngster in this country. And if we took the 15 or 20 highest performing charter management organizations and we made them 20 times bigger.
Yeah. John, talk about rocket ship. You've done very well. What's been the reception in San Jose and places where you've started charter schools? Is it a them versus us?
Well, one of the things that we've always been very focused on is making sure that we help parents to find their voice in a community. You know, I think if it was my co-founder and I talking to folks in San Jose, we'd likely to be getting into that them versus us. But you know, when we've got 2,500 parents in San Jose, 3,500 next year, and when they understand the system and how the system belongs to them as opposed to they belong to the system and are able to express that at school board meetings and with elected officials, et cetera, it basically becomes impossible to tell them that what they want is wrong. And so I think that, you know, this framing of kind of charters versus districts is actually false. I think it's parents and what parents want, and then we're there to serve the parents, and I think that's what we're trying to set up at Rocket Ship, is a dialogue from the parents to the people building schools for them.
Do the folks from San Jose Unified come see what you're doing?
Yeah, they do, and we have a great superintendent in San Jose, Vince Matthews, who's a young, reform-oriented superintendent, and so you get that. It's still a very difficult thing for any superintendent because he's got a board, and his board isn't necessarily aligned with him. I mean, it's a tough structure.
So do you invite him? Did he call you up?
Both ways. I mean, we talk all the time, so it's not confrontation.
Going forward, is that something you think the Alliance should be doing, reaching out to school superintendents, traditional public schools?
Absolutely, and let me just give you one example. I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, and if you talk to any charter school operator in D.C., they will tell you, so about 30% or more of the student population in D.C. attends a charter school, which is critical mass. I would say that a lot of the reforms that have happened in D.C., the reforms that Michelle Rees brought to D.C., happened because of that exit, because so many families were disappointed with what they were getting in the public sector. Right now, D.C. has contracted with Friendship Public Charter Schools to reform one of their worst performing high schools. And Kaya Henderson, who's the superintendent of schools in D.C., is interested herself in becoming a charter authorizer. So in that sense, I think in the D.C. area, we're seeing the impact of charter schools every single day, both in terms of the kids who are leaving, getting a better education, and the impact it's having on the current school system. But yes, I mean, I've always been a believer in the impact of charters, not so much on the kids attending them, but on the larger school system. I don't think that as a movement, we should be happy with the notion of a lot of students leaving our system and kids being left behind in poor-performing public schools. Ultimately, we need to find a way to get the public sector to really emulate the best practices in schools like John Danner's and other schools all across the country for this movement to really take root and have the impact that
And I think the Gates Foundation made some grants to try to make that happen, the cooperation.
That's right, we're doing it. There are 16 cities across the country that have signed formal compacts with their high-performing charters and the districts to figure out ways to work better together.
Okay, let's look forward the next 20 years. I mean, I hear a couple of couple of sort of disturbing issues bubbling up. One is all the conversation about CMOs and networks. I mean, you make it sound as if you think you have the recipe, and all we have to do is have a whole lot more management CMOs. Am I misreading what you're saying?
No, I mean, it's great to have more CMOs and EMOs, education management organizations, scaling what they have to the extent those programs are of high quality. But I'm also a firm believer in giving the tools needed for effective charter schools, individuals that are currently running single-site schools, the resources they need to expand so that they're serving more students within their schools. And to the extent they're interested in scaling, find a way to give them the opportunity to scale. So the goal will be to scale quality, not necessarily via the CMO or EMO route.
But you know what? The goal is to save children's lives.
And so, no,
John, but let me explain what I mean.
Rhetorically, though, if the people who are talking about CMOs say, "Oh, we don't need mom and pops."
No, I'm against it. I think that this movement has to have a place for someone who wants to create a single great school in their community to serve their children.
But that's
Okay.
Is there room?
What do you mean, is there room? I'm saying we got to make room. The people who are going to stop it from, is there room, are the people who got resources who will say, for example, we're going to move all of our investments towards CMOs and EMOs. The reality of it is that if there's somebody out there with a great school serving kids, they ought to have access to resources, and they should not be pushed to go create 10 schools so that you'll be of value.
But that's my question, is the Alliance now pushing toward those networks? I mean, there's a broad prize for networks. Is it a little bit like saying, I'm going to give a prize to the person, or you're invited to a costume party, but the only people who qualify for the prize are people who wear blue? I mean, are you tilting?
As I said, again, the focus will be on quality, inviting newcomers who know what they're doing so that they can, I mean, the spirit of this movement is around always inviting new people like John Danner and others to come up with new ideas. If we lose that piece, this movement will die, in my opinion. But at the same time, I think it's important to look at the successful charter management and education management organizations that are doing a good job and see if there are ways to scale their programs, and at the same time, invite newcomers and give resources to small mom and pops to do more with what they have.
You don't mean mom and pop as a pejorative?
No, that's what Howard said, sorry.
Who, me?
So John, once again, it's not either or. And we're creating this whole battleground again. I mean, we watched in the early days when all the charter leaders circled the wagons and shot at one another. I mean, that was the dilemma. Are you CMO or are you not? Are you going to go 50 schools, go 10 schools? A good single independent charter in a place that's serving kids better than they're currently served is so needed in this country. And what I think is going to happen, I mean, my prediction on the future is we're in an interesting time. And the interesting time, I would say, is we're into that crossover going the other way. Had a lot of folks come from districts into charters. Now what you're seeing is Stephen Pryor, principal at Amistad Academy, now Chief State Schools Officer in Connecticut. John King, same thing now, the New York Chief State Schools Officer. Chris Barbick, Yes Prep founder, now running the Achievement School District in Tennessee. You're finding an entirely new breed of legislators and governors that want great chiefs. They're bringing them out of the charter space because they understand this work. And you're going to see a group of leaders that are actually going to invite more and more charters in. It's not going to be perfect. I mean, I'm admitting I'm more of a hopeful romantic around this. Howard's going to take me on in no time. But we've got some promising places.
John, when you started Rocket Ship, did you say I'm going to do one school, or did you have in your head I'm going to do 5, 8?
I mean, our theory of action was that when you look at almost any major urban school district, doing one school was not going to fundamentally change the way that place operated. And so, as an example, in San Jose, we now have 30 approved charters. There are about 90 failing elementary schools in San Jose. And as we were going through that political process of getting those charters, I probably had 8 or 9 conversations with superintendents in the area, and they said to me kind of 2 things. One, be great if you would just go away. That was one thing. But two, once they got over that, thank you, because for the first time, I've got some leverage in the conversations I'm going to have with my principals, my union, and everybody else around me, that if we don't do something, those terrible rocket ship guys are going to start opening schools. So it went from, can we serve the children, to who's going to serve the children. And I think that's an important change in the conversation. It's going to happen. It's now a question of who's going to do it. So I do think scale on the charter side is going to matter. I don't think that it only has to be through single systems. In San Jose, we've probably got 7, 8 great charter schools, only 2 of which are in school systems. So,
is there, you talked about quality. To what extent do you define quality by the test scores and what you call the achievement gap? How important?
Yeah, I mean, I think we do have to use test scores as a way of trying to define quality. The question is that going to be the only way that you define quality? The second part of it is, can we develop quality metrics that fit a broad grouping of schools? For example, are you going to put the High School for the Recording Arts in St. Paul into the AYP system of accountability? They're getting kids who come in 17 years old, maybe haven't earned no more than 2 credits. How are you going to say y'all got to get AYP? I mean, so what I'm saying is we got to figure out a way to define quality that allows us to embrace a larger grouping of schools.
Because the risk is that you will stifle innovation if you define
No,
it
the
narrow.
risk is we won't save those kids' lives because we've got some kind of fixed system that doesn't allow us to serve those kids. That's the day. And I'm struggling with that because I do believe you got to use test scores. I believe you got to use value added. I don't think we can duck the importance of trying to prepare our kids to be college ready. These are things that we got to do, but we got to, as a charter movement, we got to have a broader rubric that allows for a broader set of schools in our movement.
Let me just a quick anecdote. We're filming in New Orleans, where the KIPP schools have been very successful. And I met a guy who wanted to start a charter school themed around arts, essentially really built around performance. At the end, he decided not to apply because he knew that he wouldn't be able to drive those test scores up the way KIPP was doing. And it made me wonder, is there a risk that if you go so focused on that one metric, John, are you?
I again think that, you really don't need to say you're either going to enrich students, build their character, or help them academically. I actually think you have to do both.
And KIPP does both. I mean, KIPP kids learn to play a musical instrument.
The test scores, to me, are a baseline. If you can't get good achievement with kids, that's a problem. But beyond that, what do you do in your system to build the character of children, the values, et cetera? Because we know when they go to college and they go to the workforce, it's not just about like, did they know a subject? It's, are they persistent? Do they have these characteristics that are going to make them successful?
So one of the challenges going forward, Howard's laid out, is a broader definition of quality. What are the other challenges going forward the next 20 years?
Well, I'll say this. I agree with my friend Don about all of this cooperation stuff, but I'm gonna be really clear. If we don't have a multi-strategy, some of y'all can cooperate, some of y'all can collaborate, but some of us got to fight. Right. Because the other part that we've got to be clear is not all of these districts are like out there talking about how wonderful it is to have a charter sector. And if some of us are not clear that we're going to have to fight, we're not going to survive. And so all I'm trying to say to people is collaborate when you can, cooperate when you can, but you got to be ready to fight.
Okay, so there are 2. All right, going forward, other challenges. Let me ask a specific question. Is there a challenge that the Alliance is going to be dominated by foundations? Huge support from, there's one on the stage, but you've got Broad, you've got Walton. Are they going to play too much influence on the future of the charters?
So we actually
Put you on the hot seat here.
Can I address the first question before I go to that?
Sure.
So I don't
As
like
long
to
as you
think.
go to the air.
I don't like to think about challenges. I like to think about opportunities.
Okay.
And one of the opportunities that I hope that the charter sector will really seize upon and leverage far more than they have in the past is to better utilize technology. Technology also allows you, to the extent you're using it, to differentiate learning for your students, to monitor how well your students are doing throughout the year, so that you're not just relying on kind of a snapshot test, one moment in time at the end of the year, or realize at the end of the year that the student did not learn what he or she was supposed to learn throughout the year. So I'm a big believer in using technology much more in the charter school space and coming up with better tests to evaluate student progress.
And also in the teach, a la what John is doing at
Right.
Rocket Ship. Yeah.
So in terms of the board, we have a very diverse board. It's comprised of folks from the foundation community, individuals from the education management sector, from the charter growth fund sector. So if you look at the list of people we have on our board, I think it's a very, very diverse board and an exciting board. And my hope is to get even more resources to the table and leverage a lot of the other individuals out there who may not know that they're believers in charter schools to help raise funding for this great movement. So.
Howard, John, are you concerned that foundations playing too big a part?
No, I think, first of all, I want to do exactly what Nina said and answer your first question, which is, I think the biggest challenge for this sector is that we have thought that if you just build a great school and the kids are well educated at your school, that everyone will applaud you and more of that will happen. And I think that was just hopelessly naive at the start. And I'm so surprised as we go out to cities to think about opening schools there, and I talk to other charter leaders and I say, well, how do you organize your parents? How do you help your parents to express their voice and make their needs known? And by and large, the answer is no, we don't do that. And I just think, wow, we've got, millions of students being served by these schools with a complete lack of organization for advocacy, and that's got to be the biggest miss.
But going forward, that's an important piece.
That we've got to get that right.
But I did ask a second question about the role of foundations in moving the alliance forward. Too big a role?
Yeah, but you know what, man? Like, I was down in Louisiana in the middle of the fight a few weeks ago. And so you get a call in from, it was clearly a union dude or somebody who put him up to it. So he calls in, I hear you get money from the Walton Foundation and the Gates Foundation. My response was, you know what, man? I don't get nearly enough. And what I need is I need more money.
Yeah.
Because I need more money to fight you. Because you think I'm an idiot. You got money, I don't have money. I'm supposed to apologize for getting money. Help, send me more money in order to fight you.
Well, you shouldn't be talking to me. You should be. I think he just put in a proposal. That
Yeah, we'll talk right after.
but,
So John, to me, the next 20 years are the same as the first 20 years. What do we have to get right? We have to get equal funding for the charter schools. Equal funding, equal funding, equal funding. We have to lift caps so more and more entrepreneurs can try. We have to do exactly what Howard described. We have to get more leaders of color with the same opportunities every one of us got here. And one last one. We got to quit acting like charters have to live in warehouses and get them buildings that their kids' parents paid for.
Yeah.
I mean, if we don't solve that problem, we just can't grow enough schools, and we can't have some charter out trying to convert a bowling alley. At the same time, the public school down the street is half empty.
Yeah.
We
So,
just can't.
tell me what you see happening with teacher unions in the next 20 years in charters. Do you see accommodations worked out, which have happened in a few places? John.
I think the great thing about unions is that they're practical folks. They're membership driven. So as the charter sector matures and starts to scale up, they're going to do what is necessary to protect their membership. Obviously, they're going to fight politically. We know that's going to happen. But let's assume that eventually the will of the parents overwhelms that, then I think we're going to start to see the unions do things so that they can fix schools in partnership with districts. But the level of pressure that takes before that's a viable political option for the average union president is intense. We haven't gotten anywhere near that point.
Don, Howard?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some union charters. You got what Steve Barr is doing with Finn. You've got this issue that unions don't necessarily mean poor performance. Let's try Southwest. Highly unionized, you get pretty good service. So I think they're going to fight, and I think over time we're going to notice some small shifts, and eventually the landscape will look a little bit different, a little bit more positive.
Howard?
I just think that we have to do like they do. They come to our events and smile and stuff, and they're trying to crush you in the process of doing it. So we got to smile, and we got to do all of the smiley stuff, but at the end, we got to be clear, we have to be prepared to fight. Because for them, this is all about power. It's all about the control of the allocation of resources into our kids' lives. And when you're in that type of situation, you got to be prepared to cooperate where you can, but always be ready to fight from a position of power.
John, can you imagine your schools being unionized?
I mean, not right now. They're startup schools. You know, the level of teamwork it takes between our principals and our teachers is extreme. Any idea that there's a built-in kind of system where they have to negotiate just to do things, it just doesn't work at the rate of change that it requires in a startup.
So tell me what this audience should do moving forward to make that. I mean, right now, well, it strikes me that politics may be the greatest threat in the next 20 years. I mean, look at Louisiana, where you have a really quite remarkable, successful process going on in New Orleans. There's new legislation which now allows just about anybody to authorize charters, and that conceivably could undercut the whole thing. Looking forward, talk to me about the politics, and particularly Nina, since you come from the Bush administration. Does this represent a rightward turn for the alliance, bringing you in?
I knew you were going to throw that in somewhere. So let me tell you a little bit about how I started to learn about charter schools. And so again, I'm from the DC area, and back in the early 90s, mid 90s, one of the key discussions taking place in DC was the notion of offering school vouchers to the students in DC to attend private schools. So through that journey, I got to know a man by the name of Ken Amos, who's a former Xerox exec and now the leader of Community Academy Public Charter Schools in DC. So he and I came at this issue of vouchers, not necessarily because we wanted children to go to private schools or because we were conservatives, and he's definitely not a conservative. We were looking at this issue simply because we wanted to offer more opportunities for the students in DC to attend better schools, and he had a vision to create a school system that catered to the full needs of students the way kind of a community school would, so in terms of strong before and after school programs and what have you. So that's where I come from, and that's where kind of my heart is when I approach this issue. It just so happens that President Bush offered me an opportunity to run the Office of Innovation and Improvement and gave me a platform through which I could advocate for charter schools, and that's where I met a lot of the charter leaders in this room, a lot of the state charter associations. So my hope is to really leverage the expertise of the different charter leaders at the state level to bring more clout and power to the discussion at the federal level.
The politics going forward, and particularly what we see happening in Louisiana, which seems like it could be a game changer that may threaten the kind of quality that you all are concerned about.
I think our movement is just beginning to wake up that we're actually in politics. Right? We thought we were in the school business, but we're in a highly regulated political system that requires you to create political will. And we're just figuring that out 20 years later.
So what does that mean going forward?
That means you've got to get parents organized. That means that the people who have been funding these things, while they've been putting 100% of their dollars towards program and 0% towards politics, maybe they need to think about that asset allocation. I mean, there are a lot of things that this movement needs to change if we're serious about taking it all the way.
John, going forward quickly?
Yeah, I would say the same thing as John. I'm going to use California as an example. It's a term limit state for its state officials, and there is not a single state senator or state assembly member that's a charter champion in California. And if you don't have one that's powerful and knows how to move the system, you lose. So the only way to do that is ground up parent stuff, and here's what I'll agree with Howard. You got to be willing to fight to get that voice.
Final thought, Don?
Yeah, real quickly, it's not just parents, it's ministers, it's all types of youth leaders, it's all of these folks that we got to bring to the table. And just the last thing, you talked about Louisiana, the union just sued to stop all of those reforms.
Yeah. So going forward, get ready to fight, be political, stay focused on quality, but find a broader rubric, increase the pool of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Did I get it all?
I think you got it all.
So it's going to be a great 20 years?
Nice job.
And this has been a great group. Would you please give it up for them? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we walk off.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Very much.
Okay, I think we...
You came.